Good evening. And tonight we are back with another episode of What is Child Abuse. For the past month already, we've been talking. For those who haven't been tuned in, we've been talking about what child abuse is, and we trying to look at the topic or the issue from different angles. So, um, last the previous 2 weeks we had the pink ladies talk to us. This week, last week we had a foster home, and we talked about their challenges. And tonight we are talking to an ex-police officer. So for us if you don't know us, we are good enough. We are for the children. We talk about the children, everything that is related to children. That is what we do. And so, before we go a bit too much into this topic, we are going to welcome. Um, should I call you Captain Morris or should I call you X? Um,
Re- Retired, so
Retired Captain Morris.
yes, yeah. But you can call me
There we
Colin. My friends do.
Okay, so we are talking to. It sounds better if I say a retired captain. It sounds much better.
It
So
does.
we are talking to him, to get on the and he will, once he introduce himself, you guys will understand why that he's been in the child protective space for years. So maybe I'll give you this time to introduce yourself. Who are you and what have you been up to?
Thank you. Thank you for that. Good evening to you and good evening to the listeners. Yes, I have been a police reservist for 32 years. In other words, I volunteered my services free of charge. I was not a member of the permanent force. But in those 32 years, 20 odd something years, I worked in what was originally the Child Protection Unit, or the CPU. That then morphed itself into what became the FCS, the Family Violence, Child Protection and Sexual Offences Unit. And I was based in Johannesburg for that period of time, and I retired 15th of October last year, after
Mm.
many years in both the police and in the Child Protection Unit.
Okay. So you are fresh off retirement. Is that what you're trying to tell us?
Yeah, nearly a year. In a few days' time, it'll be about a year.
So we are this month we're talking about child abuse. Let's start off with, first of all, just what is child abuse?
Okay, so child abuse. The term child abuse is very easily used and thrown around by members of the public,
Okay.
because that encompasses anything. That would encompass sexual abuse, physical abuse, even to an extent emotional abuse. In terms of
Okay.
the police and in terms of the law, in terms of statutory acts, only physical, sexual uh, abuse is termed criminal, whereas mental abuse is not necessarily criminal. That could be seen as a civil case, but in terms of the criminal acts, only sexual and physical assault or abuse is child abuse. So, child abuse per se, in the legal sense, is not a legal word. It's just a generic sort of overview of what could be happening to children.
Oh, so if I am in the mental, if I'm being abused mentally, if you, for instance, say neglect, that is not really seen as abuse. Is that so?
No, no, I'm sorry. So, child neglect is certainly seen as a criminal act. So, if a
Hmm.
parent neglects a child, let's say a parent leaves a child alone in a car, a heated car, or a blocked car in the sun, that is child neglect. That is certainly a criminal act. And
Okay.
the same case could be in the terms of, and we had a very interesting case some years ago. And I don't mean
Yeah.
interesting that it was fun interesting, it was interesting in that it was sad and terrible. But the boyfriend of a mother had
Yeah.
physically abused the child, and the mother ignored it. So the boyfriend was charged with assault, and
Yeah.
the mother was charged with neglect. So both of those were criminal cases.
S- So if uh, if it's in a case like this, you will then be it will then be seen as you can be charged with it, because there's a sense of w- how is it that only that kind of neglect is almost like chargeable, com- if you add rape and um physical abuse to it, but if it other mental illnesses, that is more tended to when it comes to the your social workers, for instance.
Yeah, so the system is very it's designed not to be harsh in terms of the child, obviously. So it's
Yeah.
always the best interests of the child. So
Okay.
within our South African Constitution, it's the best interests of the child, and within the Child Care Act, it's always the best interests of the child. So it's very important to think of the best interests of the child. And
Okay.
sometimes it might be in the best interest of the child to bring in a social worker and to put the child in either foster care, or even
Mm,
just assist the parents because they don't know or understand how to look after the child. But
mm,
if it's patently abuse and it's patently um, neglect,
mm-hmm,
and then they do have the wherewithal and they do know what they're doing is wrong, then that
mm,
becomes a criminal act. And they could then be charged and could go to jail. In the example I gave you a little earlier, she got a suspended sentence and then later fell pregnant again with another child. And we then arranged with the social workers to come and remove the second child because she'd already been proven not to be capable of looking after children. So we didn't
mm.
want another child to be abused.
Okay. Okay. And
Excuse me.
understand that now. Um, let's before we go to the other question, let's first do this. How do you report abuse?
All right, how you report
Mm-hmm,
assault, sexual assault, or neglect. The law is very clear that any child that is intentionally neglected or intentionally abused has to be reported by any person, any member of the public. So the first port of call would be your local police station
okay.
or to your local social services. But my advice would always be to the local police station. Every local police station should have an FCS unit attached to it, and if it's a specialized case like a child rape or like a child assault, then the FCS or the Family Violence, Child Protection, and Sexual Offences Unit member should take that over and make sure that they then deal with it.
It's called family violence.
Family Violence, Child Protection, and Sexual Offences Investigative Unit, or FCS.
So
And
protection.
unfortunately, each FCS or each area has got their own mandates. So
Mm,
there's a slight difference. There's an overall mandate,
mm,
but each unit around the country, each area around the country might have a different mandate.
okay.
But the
Okay.
best bet and the first step should always be to your local police station.
Local police. Okay. So we go there, and what would you need to take with you to say, I believe this child is being abused?
Well, clearly, firstly, you need to understand you. I would not be using the word child abuse. So
Mm,
the reporting would be the act that's taken place. If it's assault, the person going there would be able to say, this child has been assaulted, this child has been hit, this child has been beaten. And what is very important is that the complainant has to be part of this. So the complainant in this case would have to be the child, and the child would have
mm-hmm,
to be able to testify and tell both the investigating officer and the court what had
mm,
happened. So the first step would really be that the adult who is now reporting this plus the child would have to go and report it.
mm. So if you really don't have the child, does it not make your reporting as valid as if you do have the child there?
Well, it's important to have the child because if you're going to go to court about that, the child or the complainant has to be present.
Mm-hmm,
In terms of if it's somebody who's concerned, then they would go in and open up a case, and it wouldn't be a registered case necessarily. It could be an investigation, and then it's the job of the local police to go and find out what is going on. So your question to me initially was uh, who should go with, who shouldn't. So the
Mm,
first prize is always to have the complainant or the child with you. If you don't
mm,
have that and it's just a concerned citizen, then you could
yeah.
even phone up Childline. You could phone up your local social services. You could
Mm,
phone up Power, any one of those organizations to start
okay.
the process of getting it reported.
Awesome stuff. We're actually talking to Childline next week, so that will be we will get a bit more information as to their processes. If you are more just a concerned um, community member that is saying, "I want to report this," but
Yes.
I do not have the child with me. So
And the
we.
child line has a 24/7, 365 crisis line, and you can
Mhm.
phone in there. They can give advice, and they are a very, very good organization. So they can give advice. They can reference you to the correct people, and move it on that way if you don't have the child with you.
Oh, okay, awesome. I love that information. So we have an abuse, we have child abuse, um, and you've kind of explained the definitions. And the one thing we said prior to our interview, I said I really wanted to talk about is, does we obviously know about Pink Ladies gave their version of it, Arise gave their version of it. Does the severity of abuse and the type of abuse change when you get to different areas?
Okay, so that's always an interesting question. In my view, my personal view, every single area, every single community, every single grouping has elements of child abuse. Without a
Okay.
doubt, though, there's different types of abuse in different areas. So
Mm-hmm.
the poorer areas might have more physical abuse and less sexual abuse. The richer areas might have more sexual abuse and less physical. But every city, it's not predominant only in poorer areas. It's not predominant in a particular racial group. It's all over. It's in every
Mm-hmm.
racial group. It's in every uh, uh, grouping, and it's in across. It's across every socio-economic groups,
Mm-hmm.
but certainly different types. My experience has been that there's been different types of abuse in different areas.
Okay. And would you maybe also give us a little bit of what the depending on the type of abuse that there is, say for instance Mitchell's plain, let's use that. Um what would you link to why there would be that kind of abuse in Mitchell's plain, for instance?
Okay, I don't know Mitchell's Plain well enough, but
Mm,
certainly what I could tell you is that in certain areas where there's lots of unemployment, lots of alcohol, lots of
mhm,
drugs, that could possibly be a element that could lead to child abuse.
mhm.
Alcohol definitely is a precursor to physical abuse, and it
Okay.
lowers everybody's inhibitions and could possibly lead to sexual abuse as well.
Okay. So in an area like that you will find a lot of sexual abuse.
Possibly, possibly,
Yeah.
yes.
Where would things such as neglect, what kind of social ills would kind of linked to neglect? A lot of neglect as an abuse,
Again, that's a
the type of
difficult one.
abuse. Hmm.
Again, that's a difficult one, but that goes across all areas as well because lots of neglect takes place in poorer areas, but that's simply because they can't afford it. But I've seen
Okay.
neglect in rich and well-to-do areas as well, where they can afford it, and they just simply don't do it because they not nice people.
Mm, mm,
So
okay.
again, that would be what I said in the beginning around about neglect, is that
Mm,
the certain people might neglect their children intentionally, and that would then
mm,
be dealt with in a criminal case. And if they're
okay.
neglecting their children because they simply don't have the wherewithal, that would be dealt
Mm,
with by social services.
okay. So if there's an intent behind it, that is almost more criminal. And then if there's no intent,
Correct.
like I'm a teenage mother and I don't know how to handle my child, that is more social services.
Correct. Exactly right. and we have a great system that should be
Mm,
dealing with all of that. That
mm,
if it's a if, as you correctly said, if it was somebody that just doesn't know how to, or doesn't have the wherewithal, doesn't have the money, then
mm,
social services should come in and assist them. It's not always the case of just removing the child.
mm.
The primary focus would be for the child to stay within the family environment,
Yeah.
and social services would assist with that.
Yeah, yeah, that is something that Arise did bring up when we were talking about foster homes, and they kind of brought it to our attention. They always try and keep the family together, even if it's they have to take the kid away for now, to protect the child, and then almost prep the family to receive the child back type of situation. That is always that they will try and do to keep that unit as one. Um,
Correct.
so
So the
yeah,
family unit is primary.
okay,
Sorry,
okay.
the family
Yeah.
unit is primary,
Mhm.
and to have a biological mother is much better than having an adoptive mother or a foster mother. And the job of social services is then to assist, teach, and help financially if that's needed.
Okay. And if we're now talking about the abuse and how community kind of plays a part in it, um, something that we also brought up with the rise was this: does a lot of, or in my opinion, it does, but does a lot of how our culture kind of gives a lot of loopholes to abuse creeping through. And I'll make an example, which is kind of like in our colored communities, we are taught as children that when you greet, you need to um, greet the uncle. So everyone automatically is being labeled as the uncle or the auntie, which makes the person not seem as a threat as maybe they should be. Or the other thing that we are also very big on is that when you must greet, you must kiss the person or you must hug the person, whether you want to or not. Um, what I've seen with my own children is, and it's something that we also brought up last week, is in the parks, you kind of, we because it's an uncle, they would they would walk away quicker with the uncle because it's not, there's no fear now anymore because you told me I need to speak to the uncle. So in the last few months, we actually with our own children kind of brought it up as to, no, this is sir, this is ma'am. The only uncle that you know is your brother's brother and my brother. Um, and so now you can almost see that shift that is happening in them, as in, I don't know this person, it's still unknown, and so I need to treat them as that and not this everyone is like friendly kind of thing. Does the way we grow up or the culture around everything kind of give loopholes? And we're not defending people and saying that we're giving them the right to hurt people, but there's certainly things that we do that allow certain elements into our children's lives a bit more easier.
All right, so that clearly is a very difficult question for me to answer.
Hmm.
And because in my many years in the child protection unit, I would always tell a mother or a father, I am not going to teach you how you must teach your children. I can't
Hmm.
tell you how to teach your children. However,
Hmm. Hmm.
However, the most important thing that any parent should be learning and any parent should be teaching their children is that their children must be empowered. Their children must be empowered to say no. Their children must be empowered to understand that their bodies are their own and they can say no. And certainly, your example of go hug the uncle, go give the uncle a big kiss is a big no no, in my personal opinion. Some years ago, we had that incident where there was a young girl who she'd been physically abused by somebody that she knew. It was around
Hmm.
about the Christmas period, and we had been donated many teddy bears. And they walked into the unit, and there were all these teddy bears in our unit. And I gave one to the child, and the mother said, "Go and give the uncle a hug." And I said to her, "Don't. Do you not understand that by giving me, who she's only met a few hours ago, a hug,
Mm.
you're disempowering this person. You're
Mhm.
allowing them to think that it's okay to hug funny little old men, and
Mm.
that is definitely a no-no. A
Mm.
year or so later, we were doing a function at a shopping center, and we were
Yeah.
handing out suckers. And one little girl came over and took the sucker, and the parents said, "Yeah, you can take it from him. It's okay." And I was giving the sucker to the parents. The parents said, "No,
Mm.
no, give it to my daughter." I said, "No, don't you understand? I'm trying to teach that these children, not to
Mm.
take sweeties from
Mm.
funny little old men. I'm giving
Mm.
it to you, and you can give it to the children." She said, "Oh, that is so wonderful. That's so true."
Mm.
So
Mm.
the message that I would give, and I'm not telling any parent how to bring up their own children, because it's
Mm.
about respect. But the
Yeah.
big message that I would give is empower your children. Empower your
Mm.
children to say no. Empower your children to understand the difference between good hugs and bad hugs.
Mm.
Empower your children to understand that their bodies are their own and they can say no. I could tell you
Mm.
numerous stories about that. Another two famous stories, if I may, and I
Mm.
say they're famous because they're
Mm. No,
famous
you
in
may.
my head. Well,
You. Mm.
the first one
Mm.
was, sorry, can I keep going?
Yes, you can. Please do.
Thank you. The first one was many years ago. I was
Mm.
coming home from school,
Mm.
so I was still a schoolboy. I've got two younger sisters, 3 and 6 years younger than me. I was on my
Mhm.
bicycle, and my sisters were walking, and I was guarding them on the way home. And
Yeah.
some person walked past them and unbluted himself. He showed his private parts to them. But my sisters were empowered enough to tell me and to tell my parents. So they knew that it was wrong. And
Mm.
that probably was my first experience of child abuse, my first experience of empowerment. I, at age, I don't know, about 12 or 13,
Mm.
charged off after him on my bicycle to go and find him, couldn't find him. But the good part of that story was that my
Mm.
sisters were empowered enough
Yeah.
to understand that it was wrong, and they told us. They
Yeah.
didn't think that it was a normal thing for adult
Mm.
men to walk around showing their private parts.
Mm.
So that's to me, empowering your children is a vital part. The next part of the story is a case that I dealt with also some years ago. Now I'm in
Mm.
the police, and the case was a adult man of about 21 years of age who
Mhm.
has finally come out and told his therapist and his parents that he had been abused by the school principal between
Sure.
the ages of like 9 and 13. He'd been abused, and the
Mm.
parents didn't know about this. But the worst part was that he thought his parents knew about it, so he
Mm.
was too ashamed to tell his parents. So to me that was one of the many sad stories, because for from 13 to 18 he had a terrible childhood. 18 to 21 he went to therapy, and only
Mm.
at 21 he finally could tell it. And when he told his parents that this had happened, they said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And he said,
Mm.
"I thought you knew."
You knew. Mm. Yeah. And I
So
and I I guess
the
you
hint
guys
the
have
hint
a.
I would give the hint I would give
Yeah.
as a non
Mm.
proscriptive parent is empower your children to
Yeah.
understand what is right and wrong. Empower your children to come and tell you what's right and wrong, and
Mm.
empower your children to understand their bodies are theirs.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say, what when you were talking, I guess you guys hear a lot of these stories of once the kids comes out, it's like I thought you guys knew. So what is some of the signs maybe that we as parents can also look out for um when your child is being abused?
All right, so what is very important is to see changes in children's day to day attitude. So, if a child suddenly wants to stay at school more often, it means it doesn't necessarily mean definitively, doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean definitely that something's happening, but something
Yeah.
could be happening at home. If the child doesn't want to go to school, something could be happening at school. And that's a very difficult one to also say. Children don't like going to school. I didn't like going to school,
Mm.
so that might be, but there's change in people's or children's attitudes. Another
Okay.
one, typical one, is suddenly little girls don't want to take their tops off it in gym, or don't want to change in public, and that could be
Mm.
because they've got bruises. It could be that they're ashamed. So what school teachers, what parents, what everybody should be looking at is fundamental and substantial changes in children's behavior, And then a question, why isn't this? Why aren't you doing this? And an
mm,
honest question. They may be able to tell you, they may not be able to tell you. And it
mm,
might be just for a pubescent child, it might just
mm,
be that she's now growing up and she's
mm,
shy of what she's got, or a young
mm,
boy shy of what they got. So, and that's quite normal. But the
mm.
abnormal would be if somebody is doing something to them.
Yeah, and I guess it comes back to what most of our interviews, I said, is to get to know your child again, and always stay have that kind of relationship where they can come to you, and you do notice certain things that is happening in their lives.
Correct.
Um, yeah,
Correct.
you
That is
know,
vital. Be
mm,
empowering your child to be able to come and tell you that X, Y, Z has happened. Empowering your child, and it goes back to that hugging the worm. Go hug the uncle. Go hug
mm,
the worm.
mm,
If that's part of the relationship, then they're not going to tell you that the worm hugged them and then felt them up, because
mm,
they're going to think, well, that's part of the hugging.
mm,
Or daddy and
mm,
mommy knows that that's what happened, and
mm,
also understand the children's uh, age group. So then the cognitive development of a child is important. There's some
mm,
children who think that it's okay to be hugged and felt up.
mm.
And
Yeah.
that's sad because that those parents have not empowered their children enough or educated their children enough. That is not the case. And what's important, and you're probably going to get some feedback about this, is
Mm,
that calling an older person uncle or auntie is a sign of respect. The respect must remain. I'm not saying don't take away the respect. But what I
mm.
am saying is that the child must understand that they don't have to do anything they don't feel comfortable with.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's something that we've also learned because our children are still very young. So automatically, when you give them, I'm sure when they're a bit older, we can then say, "Look, there is an uncle." So what we've kind of tried to do was like, there is still an uncle. You can, but it's not your uncle. It's not flesh and blood. So you can either just
Yeah,
call him sir, you're still respecting him. You can call him sir, you can call them ma'am, but understand that that is not family. So because they call my husband's brother uncle, they he seems friendly, they know he's safe, and so they automatically apply that boundaries to every uncle that they have now meet on the street, which is not necessarily what we wanted. And
yeah. Me
so it's
growing up, I
it's
all my parents'
mm,
friends were uncle and auntie.
mm,
So we
mm,
had real uncles and aunties, and we had parents' friends who were uncle, and it was meant as a sign of respect. And as I got
mm,
older, I'll never forget Auntie Rona saying, "Don't call me Auntie
yeah.
Rona." I said, "I can't change it. You will always be my Auntie Rona." But we were brought up
Yeah.
with the respect and the knowledge
Mm,
that Auntie Rona
yeah.
would, if she did anything, I'd go and tell my mommy.
Yeah, but I guess how life changed now, you kind of do have to be a bit more descriptive when it comes to the kids, as to know this is why I'm telling you not to do that. Because even in after my therapy, because I've been um a victim or a statistic of rape and this is also the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, which is pedophilia. Where I had to go live by an auntie's house, and then they had all the boys, and then with the game, he touch you with your shoulders. It's you feel it's not right, but he makes it right because you're playing. The next thing, the end, next game, the hand is now on your bum, and it's so afterwards you almost don't feel that this touching is wrong because they kind of um how do you say, prepare you for
Yes.
what is coming. So is that also how do you kind of deal with, and how do you almost prepare your child? And I'm sure you guys have worked with a lot of these incidents in the child protection unit.
Yeah. So another comment that I want to make, which is quite important, is that most of the child abuse or certainly sexual abuse, takes place within people that the child knows.
Mm,
So there's a figure thrown out: over 80% of sexual abuse is perpetrated against children by people that they know, and those
mm,
people are family members,
mm,
school teachers, people that they know. very small amounts of people that they don't know.
Okay.
And what you've just explained there is the process of grooming, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's a legal term grooming or the grooming of somebody where that becomes, it starts off as just a mild touch, an uncomfortable touch, then
Yeah.
becomes a little bit more uncomfortable, then it becomes comfortable, and then
Mm,
thinks, okay, well, maybe this is what should be happening. And
mm,
that person is generally older, that person is
mm,
generally somebody in power,
mm-hmm.
and the child doesn't understand at the time that this is wrong. And if they don't put a stop to it, then it also changes from saying, well, it's wrong now, maybe it's my fault.
Yeah.
And that's where I say to you, understanding the child's psyche or anyone's psyche, that it must be very clear, whoever interviews that child, that it's never that person or that child's fault, that it took them so long to report it,
Mm,
because the grooming is a very slow process. Nobody just goes and touches a child on their private parts immediately. It's a slow process. Touch, feel. The guy walked past my sister's. If no one had reported him, he would have done
mm,
something else, somewhere else,
mm,
to someone else.
mm. Okay. Um, and so, like, when it comes to say child abuse, when it's the sexual side of everything, so sexual abuse, is it more, well, I would assume is it's more difficult to almost catch those perpetrators, because doesn't it require the child to almost tell their side of the story?
So, of course, I said that right in the beginning, that it's very, in the court of law, the child, the victim, the survivor has to be able to give their side of the story. In terms of South African law, we have the most wonderful laws. There are laws to protect the children. You can have this intermediary in between the child and the court. In other words, the child tells their story. There's an
Mm-hmm.
intermediary between them and the court, so that the child isn't traumatized, but from the questions that are put to them. That is age limited,
Okay.
and has to be an application has to be done in court. But we do have that. So the laws are great. But yes, to answer your question, the child has to testify in a court of law. And what makes it very difficult is very often, and remember I said this just now, very often it's a family member, it's somebody
Mm-hmm.
they know, it's somebody they trust, it's somebody that they love. So
Yeah.
they're going to have to testify against somebody they love, and they're going to have to testify against somebody that they know, when that person is found guilty, may go to jail, may never be able to see them. So it's extremely traumatizing, and that
Mm-hmm.
child needs a very strong and hard support system, parents that stand by them, friends that stand by them, psychologists and psychiatrists that stand by them, school
Mm-hmm.
teachers that stand by them. So you mentioned just now about community. It's
Mm-hmm.
vital that the community understands that child abuse, and particularly sexual abuse, should never be allowed to happen. And everyone in the community stands by this person, never questions why it took them so long, why did they do this, because that person is now testifying against somebody that they probably love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes you get these questions when, say, for instance, I've been raped at the age of 16 and I only come out and talk about it at the age of 35. And then, and I'm glad you guys have actually mentioned this. And then people ask, yes, but why only now? um it would probably be the same thing as you just mentioned.
Yes. So again, the trauma that went through at the 16-year-old, and if we use my 13 and 21-year-old person as an example, he only understood that he had been sexually abused. He knew that something was wrong, but he only could put it together in his head when he was 21.
Mhm,
And we opened up a case there against him. And there's some famous cases, the Bob Hewitt case in South Africa, that
mhm,
was people that had been sexually abused by Bob Hewitt many, many years before. There's one or two other cases. And why there should never be a stigma attached to the fact that it took so long to report, but rather stand by this person and say, you've lived with this terrible trauma for so long, this
mhm,
terrible secret that you've
mm,
slept with, that you've walked away with. and be able to stand by them and believe them first of all, and
Mm.
understand what they've been through, and then unpack the whole story.
Okay. One more question on this is, normally we make a big taboo about women or our girls being abused. Why are we not making the same taboo or rave about it when it's boys? Is it because of the numbers that's low? Is it because it's not
No, no, can't you see I'm
happening?
smiling and I'm not answering you? So unfortunately, we live in a paternistical society,
Okay.
male-dominated society, and that's
Okay.
another favorite story of mine. I was at a high school where there was a teacher that clearly was doing unethical things. She liked to show her legs off to the boys. She liked to show all of that off, and that was an element of power. Now, did the boys ever run off and go and report her? No,
Mm,
because the
mm,
boys liked seeing her legs. The boys
mm,
liked what they were doing. Had it been the other way around, girls
mm,
and a boy and a man standing there in his short
mm,
pants with his legs, that would have been a very different story.
mm,
So again, I believe that boys and girls are equally as abused. Again, it's
mm,
different types of abuse, but it's
mhm,
all about power. The particular case that I'm talking about was a school teacher and young boys. That was a power issue.
mhm,
What needs to be understood is that boys get abused, girls get abused. But picture the story, and I used this example some time ago, where a young boy, let's say, has had sex with a adult man, and he
mm,
goes into the local police station and says, "This man has raped him."
mm,
Picture how he would be dealt with. So we need
mm,
to change our attitudes. We need to change our views around
mm,
that, because this boy already is ashamed that something happened to him, and now he's
mm,
doubly ashamed because he's now also being tagged maybe as a
mm,
homosexual.
mm, 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 mm.
So it
Yeah.
certainly happens to boys and girls, but again, the community has to be able to say it's not right whether it's a boy or it's a girl, and power
Mm,
is the big issue. So most of the cases of violent sexual abuse is
mm.
around power.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I love the words that you're playing with tonight. If we need to empower our girls, um, and then also with the abuse that is happening is about showing power. So a lot of
Empower our
times,
children, not empower
yeah,
our girls.
sorry,
Empower.
well, our children, sorry for that. So empower our children. um so but when abuse happens, we almost like disempowering our children, because it's a form of power that they're playing with. um
Correct.
and so there's always this power play between, but in a way we always, the perpetrator almost always wins, because our children do not know the power that they hold within. um and especially with talking out, I guess.
Yes.
um yeah.
Yes.
And I think, yeah, you can continue.
And another thing that we always drummed into our members, always drummed into, is that we would always say we believe the child first. So I have to be honest, is that there has been occasion where children have made up stories, have fabricated issues, but we would
Mm,
come in with the simple philosophy that we always believe them, number one, and then find out the truth. But don't want to put a percentage to it, but
mm,
more often than not, they were not fabricating,
mm,
because no child fabricates the fact that their father raped them and their
mm,
father abused them or their
mm,
uncle abused them or something like that, because it's just too traumatic
mm.
for them to go through that whole process.
Yeah.
They get interviewed by the police, they get interviewed by a forensic social worker, they get interviewed by all kinds of people. It's a
Mm,
hugely traumatic incident. So
mm.
I know I've deviated a little bit here, but the point
No.
is that our process has always been, you walk in, you believe the child,
Mm,
and you work from that,
yeah.
and you
So
empower the
always.
child. And then
Mm,
back to the comment, you re-empower the child to tell their story. And I've sat with children in my career where they would start crying, and I'd say, "Don't cry, because if you cry, I cry." And then
mm,
they'd laugh, and they'd say, "Fine, we'll work with you." And sorry, and another incident that just come to mind. I walked into a primary school in the southern suburbs of Johannesburg, and I went to interview this little girl in the principal's office, and she said to me, "Ek wil nie met jou praat nie." And I said, "Why don't you want to speak to me?" And she said, "Ek soek 'n vrou." I said, "That's fine. You want a woman? I'll get you a woman." I phoned up one of my colleagues at the office, and I said, "Please, Mackie, can you come through?" When Mackie came through, she went into the office with this child, and 5 minutes later she came and said, "I want to speak to you. I don't like this woman." And that's exactly my response. I laughed at her and I said, "Yeah, you see, because feelings don't come from what's in your pants. Feelings come from what's in your heart." And the point there was I'd re-empowered her to make the decision. She said she wanted to talk to a woman. The woman that I got was very, very, very good investigating officer, but she was miffed that she had to be called out for this. So she came in with a bit of an attitude. This little girl then told me her whole story, and she trusted me and she liked me, and we moved forward. But
Yeah.
I agreed with her and I allowed her to make the decisions, and that was it. A
Yeah.
wonderful story. One day when I'm big and I write my book, that will be in my book.
I hope you do. It's a wonderful story. It is. It definitely it is. Yeah. As I like the way we're talking about it. We oftentimes, when things happen or go wrong in our communities, we are quick to point the finger, but we never asking ourselves, so what can we do? What is our role in everything of the in this whole situation? So we already found out a lot what we as a community can do, how we can empower our children, how we as parents can empower our children, and which is wonderful because just today, just we might go a little bit off topic. We spoke about teenage pregnancies, and there was a whole debate about it, and we kind of we came about with is okay, so most times when they talk about teenage pregnancies, it's about abstinence, so you must abstain from sex, um and if these condoms. But what about the what in a case like abstinence? And the topic basically came about this. So, ma'am, I'm with my boyfriend. I know I'm not supposed to have sex. There's all of these feelings that is going through my body. What then? Um, and I'm like, and that is where I want to come back to the empowering part of it. We always so before it was children should not be seen, we shouldn't talk about things. Now we're giving too much information, but we do not kind of explain to the children what needs to happen. We're not really empowering them. We're just giving them a lot of information to, hey, gaan daar is jy, gaan skryf die toets. Jy, there's no like preparation. It's just like, here's the information, go write the test. And so we're really not empowering them.
Okay, so my answer to that is also quite complex. I grew up in South Africa, and as you can see by the grys hare, I grew up in South Africa many years ago, and there wasn't such things as smartphones. There wasn't such things as television. In fact, in my early years, so things have changed. I am not sure that I come to the party with sex education at schools, but it's vital that everybody does teach your children the basics because it's out there. So if they don't get it from you, they're going to get it from somewhere else. And I had a wonderful example of that also some many years ago. I was I was called just after Boxing Day in December to a young girl who had been raped by her father. So she had been visiting her father on Boxing Day. Mother and father were divorced. And she told me he used a condom. And I looked at her and I said, "Hang on a second, you're 11 years old. How do you know what a condom is?" And she
Mm,
said, "But I know what a condom is. It's on the billboards. It's on the television. I know exactly what a condom." And I said, "Oh, yeah, you're right." So I was in my frame of mind. When I was 11, a condom was exactly. Had no idea. It was like a secret thing. And somebody would bring it to school and it was like a scam the neckie.
balloon.
But exactly. We do. You couldn't even buy one over the counter. You'd have to go and scale and buy one, or you get somebody older than you. It was so whether that was right or wrong, I'm not going to argue. But the fact remains that this little 11-year-old knew what a condom was. The next point was that she told me that he had used the condom Then he took it off his thingy, rolled it up, and
Mm.
put it back in the box. Now, I was of the age that I knew that that isn't how condoms work. So I said, no, this is not possible. She said, no, this is.
Mm.
And I wrote the statement, and we went to search the father's premises
Mm.
that evening, and I found a box
Mm.
that said
Sure.
reusable condoms. That it was a novelty, but he had used,
Mm.
so whatever she told me was
Mm.
absolutely true, even though it was
Sure.
absolutely un impossible in
Yeah.
terms of normality. What I learned from that is always believe the child.
Ciao.
What I learned from that is that the society we're living in today is not the society that I grew up in. That your children have got access to television, they've got
Mm.
access to smartphones, they've got access to friends that can walk in and buy a condom, and it's not a scallum any longer.
Mm.
So that's an important part to be teaching everybody, to say that sex education is important because it's out there.
Mm.
The SABC 1, 2, and 3, or E, or whatever, has got semi naked people, have got
Mm.
people having sex. It's there. It's
Mm.
in our face every single
Yeah.
day. And we need to teach our children what is right and what is wrong, and
Yeah.
empower them to say no.
Yeah. Definitely empowering. We hear it a lot, but for some reason it hasn't sinked in yet. So empowering as a community, as a mother, as a father, as a sister, as an aunt, empowering your children. And I
Yeah.
think we need to um I, I almost want to say this, and I might get pulled over the fire for this. But we almost feel that once we have given birth to the child and the child has now gone to school, that is it when it comes to parenthood. You need to feed the child, you need to see that the child goes to school, but there's so much more of the emotional work that we are not doing as parents, and I'm talking from my community side, that is lacking when it comes to the child. And then who does the child goes to? It goes to the friend that also knows check about anything, but is information is information,
And
whether it's right or not.
and that's you. I go back to one of your earlier questions about different communities. So one of the things that the more affluent communities, the problems there is that they would give their daughter and their son a few hundred rand and say go for a jaw, and off they go, and they misbehave. They go off to Sandton City, they go off to Bedford Centre, whatever, with that 100 rand, and they treated like adults and they behave like adults, but they're not. They're 14, 15, 13, and that also, so that's where the difference in the crimes that then get committed against them are different in different communities. So it's
And
the
I guess,
distant parents, the parents who just
yeah.
say,
And I also guess that that is where the generational kind of abuses comes in. So I've been a teenage pregnant. I think we lost Captain for a little bit.
no,
Uh,
no, I'm
uh,
here, I'm back.
are you back?
I was
So
talking about sex. I was talking about sex with children, and somebody cut me off.
it wasn't me.
Okay, so what I was saying is different communities, different areas, different issues,
Mm,
and
mm,
each area and each community must take that responsibility and must
mm.
control those responsibilities and make a difference,
Yeah,
and not
yeah.
just talk about it and say GBV is a bad thing. Let's
Mm,
stop beating up our women and let's stop raping our
mm,
children. Do something.
mm. I love that topic because oftentimes when it comes to the based violence week, we protest, it goes quiet, we move on, we protest something else, we move on, we make a big fuss about that. But in the process, our children is nothing is actually changing because we are not changing it inside the house as well. It doesn't start there. We want to protest outside, but we don't bring it into the house and say, we as a family will change. I will change as a mom. I will change as a dad. And so that's leading the way for you guys as the children.
Correct. Correct.
Mm,
And understand again that violence against children, sex against children, over 80% potentially takes place by people that they know and love.
Mhm. Yeah. So on that note, we have certainly learned a lot tonight about how to report, what is our duties, where are the shortcomings, um, and I like the fact that almost every different department that we've spoken to, there is some overlapping. So it means um part of these issues well, the way I feel is a lot of the issue starts in our community, but we want it to be fixed. And it starts in our homes, but we want it to be fixed externally. Which is probably right, yes, because when we spoke to Jackie from Pink Lady, she mentioned something that says we are not in that almost Ubuntu stage anymore where I know who's my neighbor, I look after my neighbor's child. We almost just want to kind of be an island on our own. But when something happens, we want this community to stand behind us. But you don't even know who is in the community. Where must I go if something happens? So we talk about being prepared for bad situations, but we never really do that drill. Like when you are um in corporate, you kind of have to do once a while. You must do a drill that says, if there's a fire, where will you go down? You do a drill so that if it happens, you are prepared. So in communities, we don't really do that. We are talking about child abuse, we are talking about bullying, but we never do the drill with inside our own families, as kind of like, we'll see what will happen. There's no evacuation plan, emergency plans to kind of stop it. It's just, let's talk about it. And if it happens, we keep our fingers crossed and hope we will get out safe, type of
And
thing.
blame somebody else if it doesn't. And none of us too much because, oh, it's the bloody police didn't do their job or the bloody
Mhm.
social workers didn't do their job. The reality is that strong communities make strong children, make strong adults. And yes, the police are there to make certain, but whatever you and I have been speaking about today,
Mm,
it's a communal issue, number one,
mm,
and a
mm,
societal issue, number two.
mm,
So
mm.
it relies on everybody within the community to stand together, to make a difference, to make sure that the organs of state are there to help us, but make sure that it doesn't happen within your own home.
Yeah, yeah.
And sorry, just to add something. Yes, I've
Mhm,
worked very closely with Pink Ladies. I
mm,
worked very closely with social services. I've
mm,
lectured and spoken to many different schools.
mhm,
And it's all about teaching, empowering, moving forward. But you're
mm,
100% correct. Unless the home does it, we're
mm.
never going to get this answer right.
Yeah, yeah. It's a real reality kick when we do these interviews. It's scary for you as a parent to know that you must always almost update your software as a parent, else your laptop is not going to work in this society that we're working in now. You always need to upgrade to the new phone, and it's wonderful how quickly we can do it physically. Go in, buy a new phone because iPad or Apple has a new brand of phone. We can quickly go do that. But when it comes to our family, we kind of are not so quick to upgrade us as a family unit. We're not quick to do that. But when it comes to the physical and the clothing and all of these things, we will do that, but we won't invest when it comes to our families and our communities. So with that, I don't know if you have anything else to add as we say goodbye. Is there any parting words from your side?
Yeah, so I liked your analogy of the upgrading the phone. Another analogy would be is that nobody to get a gun license you need to go for a course. To get a driver's license you need to go for a course. But to become a parent or to become a parent of children you
Mm.
never had to go for a course. So we maybe need to look at that as well.
Yeah, a parenting course.
Yeah. Before you can get
Def-
married and have children, or before you can have children, today you don't even have to get married before you have children, but a
yeah,
parenting course.
yeah, definitely. I think we should be working on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was lovely talking to you. I would absolutely love talking to you. You opened my mind to obviously different aspects of what we and I think there is again why we love doing these interviews, because we kind of always just view a certain topic from one aspect or one side, but with talking to all of the departments, you're kind of looking at the topic from different angles, or the glass from different angles, and so you're viewing more, you're getting more insight, and I love that. I would really I want to thank you for your time, and time is a commodity these days that no one can afford really. But I want to thank you for taking time out of your braai um, to come and talk to us tonight. Really appreciate it. Again, for those that are still going to listen to the stream afterwards, please listen. There's a lot of tips that you can get in there. On the comments we also placed the where to go and reports. If you go to our previous chats with a Rice family and also the Pink Ladies, she also has given us a lot of tips on to where and which organizations to go for different things. So every Saturday we get together, we talk about child abuse. Well, in this month we are talking about child abuse. Next week we are talking to Childline. They will give us their perspective of everything and how they work in their organization. And then we're ending it off talking about the whole mental part of it. And then after this, once we're done, we definitely delving into children and sex. That will be a nice conversation to have. So again, for everyone who's been watching, thank you for tuning in. For those that are still gonna watch, thank you also for tuning in. Check us out every Saturday night when we discuss different topics with different organizations, basically. And we want to say a very heartful thank you to retired Captain Warren Collins for joining us tonight. If
Can
there's
I make
anything
one
else,
comment? One
yes,
quick comment. Vote
yes.
carefully in the local government elections at the end of November.
And so we must prepare for that. Empower yourself. That was the word.
Correct.
Empower yourself. That was the word
Correct.
for this interview. And it's certainly the word that we'll be carrying through the whole week and up to November month. Empower
Correct.
yourself, people.
Empower yourself
Um,
and take the right action. Vote
and take the
carefully.
yes. And with those who are still buying, I think you still have 2 more hours left before you need to lock in. So enjoy
I'm
your
going to
brides
finish my
further.
brine now. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you so
And
much. Thank you for having me.
awesome stuff. And we also want to say good night to everyone else. Good night. Be safe. Keep sane. Bye.
Cheers.